Hello viewers, in the present discipline specific paper number 13 entitled Molecules of Life, we have covered the unique properties of water which makes it as the elixir of life. We have also discussed at great length the carbohydrates, their classification, structure, properties, functions and their stereochemistry. Today we are going to begin a new unit with a series of lectures on another very important category of biomolecules, which are lipids. In this series, we shall be covering introduction, that is, I'll be introducing you to what are lipids, their classification, and in classification, I shall be very briefly covering oils and fats. Then we shall be continuing further where we will be discussing common fatty acids present in oils and fats in great details. Omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids will also be discussed. Trans fats. Then you have for fats and oils, hydrogenation, that is hydrogenation of oils, hydrolysis, their acid value, saponification value and iodine number, which will show us the properties of a particular fat, like how many hydrogen molecules are we going to use to bring about hydrogenation of an oil to convert it into fat. And if no hydrogen is being used, that means it is a fat, it is a saturated molecule. So all this will be discussed during the course of this unit. Then we shall also be discussing biological importance of triglycerides, phospholipids, glycolipids and steroids with special emphasis on cholesterol. So when we talk of lipids, why did I say that lipids are important part of our daily life? Why are they essential? Because they play an important role in all the facets of our activities. Now let me illustrate some examples. For I say that an athlete is disqualified from sports event for an illegal use of anabolic steroids. So let us see what we mean by this sentence. We mean that an athlete, whether he is a runner or he is playing in cricket or whatever activity he is doing, he is disqualified for illegal use of anabolic steroids. So what do we mean by these anabolic steroids? Anabolic steroids are which will increase the activity or the efficiency or the energy of an athlete. And he is now disqualified. Why? Because he had used anabolic steroids to increase his metabolic rate, due to which he became overactive. And what are these anabolic steroids? They are lipids. Now let's go to our kitchen. You are making French fries. You are very familiar with French fries. Or we are making a parantha. Or we are cooking something. What do we need for that? We first pour oil in the pan for cooking. We will take huge amount of oil. If we are making French fries, we will take little if we are making, say, vegetables. So what are these oils or fats which we are going to pour in the pan for cooking? They are again lipids. Now sometimes we've heard a patient has had a little heart attack. So what happens? He has pain in his chest and he's rushed to hospital and for a surgery to treat blockage in the artery. A person's gallbladder is removed. Why? Again, their cholesterol is accumulated in the arteries, due to which there is thickening of arteries and the flow of blood to heart is low. So what is this cholesterol? It is again a lipid. You go to a petrol pump. there a person comes to you, that is, he's a sales agent, and he tells you, sir, ma'am, take this polish. This will clean your car, or this will brighten your car. So what is that wax polish by which you are brightening your car? That is again a lipid. A patient is treated with prostaglandin to lower his blood pressure. This is again another example of a lipid. Now, you've often seen that once a painter comes to paint doors in your house, so we see that there are certain spots which fall on the ground while he's doing the painting. And we really panic. We say, oh, now my floor is spoilt. Then the painter tells us, don't worry, I'll clean it. And what does he clean that floor with? He cleans it with an oil, which is a turpentine oil. And this turpentine oil is again a lipid. Or you've often seen that an artist who's doing oil painting, he also cleans his brushes with turpentine oil before making another painting or before using another paint. So this is all these actions which we do in our daily life involve directly or indirectly the use of steroids. Steroids are misused, I'll say not used, I'll rather use the word misuse here, misused by athletes to increase their efficiency. Prostaglandins, fats and oils for cooking, waxes are deposits on certain leaves, and this we will be discussing. Then we have terpenes. And what are these? The compounds that we've discussed so far, they are all lipids. So now what is a lipid? The name lipid comes from a Greek word lipos for fat. So lipids are now, let us look into the chemical composition of lipids. Lipids are made up of an elements carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and sometimes little amount of nitrogen. But you have to remember that these lipids have a much lower proportion of water than other biomolecules such as carbohydrates. You know, carbohydrates are also made up of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Whereas when we talk of proteins, they are made up of carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, and oxygen. So these lipids are also made up of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and sometimes nitrogen, but they have lower proportion of water. And now in this lecture only we'll see that what is the benefit of having lower proportion of water in a molecule. The second difference that we find in which lipids differ from, say, polysaccharides and proteins, that is, they are not monomers. They are not polymers, that is, they are not polymers like polysaccharides and proteins. Why so? Because in that we do not find a repeating monomeric unit. For example, when we talk of a polysaccharide, say cellulose. So cellulose is made up of repeating units of beta-D glucose. Or when we talk of starch, it is made up of repeating units of alpha-D glucose. And these units are linked by glycosidic linkages. And when we talk of proteins, they are made up of different amino acids. Say we can have in a peptide, which is a smaller fragment of a protein. That is, we can have, say, methionine, alanine, cysteine. And these are what? These are repeating units of amino acids, which are linked by peptide bonds. We do not find such cases, such scenario in case of lipids. Lipids do not have repeating monomeric units. For example, we can say that lipids are glycolipids. That is, they are lipids which are made up of, they have a alcohol molecule and then they have acid molecule, that is carboxylic fatty acid molecule, where there is a ester linkage in them. And then, other than that, they have a carbohydrate moiety in it. So, they are different. Or if I talk of simple triglycerides, triglycerides are made up of glycerol, in which a glycerol is making bonds with 3 molecules of fatty acids. So there are no repeating units. This is one unit in itself. Whereas when we are talking of carbohydrates and proteins, we are having repeating units. As I said, in cellulose, you have a repeating unit which is beta D glucose, and in proteins the repeating units are amino acids, alpha amino acids, which may be different. So how do now lipids and carbohydrates and proteins differ? This is one way in which they are differing. And the second point you have to remember is that when we are talking of carbohydrates and proteins, they are defined in terms of their structures. That is, they are polymers, they are macromolecules. And when we define lipids, we define them on the basis of the physical operations which will be used to isolate them. We can isolate lipids, say from gallbladder, from liver, or from adipose tissue. Right. So what are we going to extract those lipids with? They can be extracted from cells and tissues by non-polar organic solvents. So that is how we differentiate between a carbohydrate, protein from lipids. So now, how can we define lipids now? We say lipids are a class of heterogeneous biomolecules characterized by low solubility in water. Right? Whereas if you talk of, say, a simple carbohydrate like glucose or, say, sucrose, they are soluble in water, whereas lipids are not soluble in water. These are oily or greasy compounds, and they are soluble in non-polar solvents like ether, chloroform, and benzene. Why is it so? Because when we discuss the structure of a lipid, you will see that the major part is made up of a hydrocarbon chain. And we know hydrocarbons are non-polar. So since the major part of the lipid constitutes of the non-polar part, they are insoluble in water and they are soluble in non-polar solvents. Remember the principle, like dissolves like. Now, what are lipids? What do they include? They include a variety of structural types like fatty acids, waxes, sterols, fat-soluble vitamins like A, D, E, and K are also lipids. It comes to your mind, why are vitamins lipids? Right? They are considered to be lipids because they are soluble in fats. Then we have monoglycerides, diglycerides, and triglycerides. We also have phospholipids. And when we talk of sterols, sterols are derived lipids. And when we are talking of, say, triglycerides and waxes, they are simple lipids. So on your screens, now you can see some examples of lipids. First is a fat or an oil, and there what you see that it is a triglyceride. When I say it's a triglyceride, what I mean here is that a glycerol molecule is making an ester bond with 3 molecules of fatty acids, and these 3 molecules of fatty acids may be different. Next is an example of menthol, which is an terpenoid, and then we have vitamin A. Vitamin A is again a terpenoid. So how would you find out that a particular molecule is a terpenoid? In terpenoid, we have a basic unit that is of isoperine. And what is isoperine? Isoperine is 2-methyl-buta-1,3-diene. That is 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is the basic unit. And we have these repeating units in terpenoids. So all this we will be discussing when we discuss terpenoids, steroids, triacylglycerols in great details. Next is a lecithin. Lecithin is an example of a phospholipid. Here what you find that glycerol makes a bond with two molecules of fatty acids, and the third group of OH is involved with a ester formation with phosphate. So these are examples again of phospholipids. Then we have cholesterol. This is also a steroid. This is also an example of lipid, and this is a sterol or a steroid. So how do we characterize this? These molecules, whenever we talk of sterols, we find that they have sterol nucleus, which is the central part. Then it has a hydrocarbon side chain and it has a hydroxyl group. So now we've seen that these are the different types of lipids which can occur. Now we have to see how can they be classified, which we will be discussing shortly. Now, where do these lipids occur? They occur naturally in most plants, animals, microorganisms. And what are their uses? They are used for cell membranes like phospholipids, and they are energy storage molecules like fats. Then when they are used as fats, that is, they are being deposited in adipose tissues. So we say if a person is fat, sometimes a person says, oh, I'm not feeling that cold. Why is it so? Because those fatty acids act as insulators and a person does not feel very fat. And then of course you have hormones, which are again lipids in nature. Now if we talk of a human body, what do we find? That in human body, major component is that of triglycerides, that is oils and fats, that is, it is made up of adipose tissue. Little amount of phospholipids are involved, which are involved in cell membrane, and then we have little amount of steroids, and normally steroids are manufactured or they are synthesized in the human body. And what are the rich sources of lipids? Milk is a rich source of lipid, olives are rich source of lipids, then you have almonds, cheese, maize, meat products, all of them are rich sources of lipids. Now, when we talk of lipids in the term of chemical structure, we say that these are molecules that are largely hydrocarbon in nature. So when you talked of a terpenoid, we found that there we had repeated unit of isoprene. And when we are talking of fats and oils, there you will see the major part is that of the fatty acid. And when we talk of fatty acids, we know there are higher fatty acids, higher carboxylic acids, which can have 14 to say large number of carbon atoms. So that part is again a hydrocarbon part. Along with that, of course, it will have a carboxylic group. And when we talk of steroids, in steroids also you saw that the basic nucleus is that of hydrocarbons. So we say that lipids are largely hydrocarbon in nature. And since they're hydrocarbon in nature, that means the highly reduced form of carbon is present there. And since it is so, when we bring about oxidation, they will yield huge amount of energy. So since they will give out huge amount of energy, these are the molecules for metabolic energy storage. So we say lipids are energy storage molecules. Whereas when we talk of carbohydrates, we say carbohydrates are source of available energy. If you remember in one of my lectures, previous lectures, I said carbohydrates are metabolic fuels. So they are ready source of energy. We are moving around, we are using carbohydrates like glucose, right? But when we talk of lipids, the excess of fat that we are using, that goes and accumulates in our body in form of adipose tissue. right? And these, we know, fats and oils are made up of triglycerides. And we know when we bring about hydrolysis of a triglyceride, it will give us how many molecules of fatty acid? It will give us 3 molecules of fatty acids, which will have 16 or more carbons in each carboxylic acid. That means the amount of energy that will be liberated, that will be enormous. So the second point that you have to remember is, as I said in the beginning of the lecture, that fats do not have high water content in them. So if they do not have high water content in them, they are very compact and they are light in weight. So they are an efficient way to store excess energy. So whatever excess energy we have, that is stored in form of fats in adipose tissue. And most of this energy, as I just said, comes from the many carbon bonds in these long chain fatty acids, right? And so therefore, large amount of energy can be liberated. But you have to remember, why do we consider that lipids are storage energy? Why? Why the lipids? Why do we consider lipids as a source of energy storage? Because they cannot liberate energy immediately. Now imagine there is some, there is some famine, or there is starvation. We go on fast. We are not having carbohydrates, we are not having proteins, we are not having any form of food, and still a person can survive for a few days. Why so? Because the lipids which are present in the adipose tissue are energy-rich molecules which provide energy for different life processes, right? So, and then these lipids will be metabolized, or they will be oxidized slowly, right? So they are, because the major part is made up of hydrocarbon. The oxygen content of lipid is less. So they do not act as a ready or available source of energy, but rather they are the storage form of energy. And then there is a common misconception that if a man is fat, or a common misconception is that lipids are fattening. That is not the case. Because we say this very fat is probably the reason for survival during famines and food shortages. Because when there is scarcity of food, we are fasting, we are not able to have food because of scarcity of food, our body uses this adipose tissue and it acts as a reservoir of energy. And our ability to store this excess calorific energy as fat in our adipose tissue helps us for future usage during the time of starvation. So lipids are very important, right? Don't forget that. So we say, in fact, normal fat reserves indicate that the metabolic processes of a person are efficient and he is healthy and he will be able to survive even in the case if there is some crisis, that is food crisis. Not only that lipids are acting as food energy reservoirs, lipids also provide insulation to nerve cells, right? The electrical signals for neurotransmission are insulated by a myelin sheet. Now imagine you compare your nerve cells to an electrical wire, and we do not have a plastic sheet over this electrical wire, and we are using it with our naked hands. What will happen? You will get a shock, electric shock. Similarly, we cannot afford that nerve cells do not have this myelin sheet on them, because if they do not have, what will happen? There will be some shortage in the circuit of nerves, and that we cannot afford, because we cannot afford a short circuit with naked electrical wires in our body. So we have to see that lipids again are very important because they are providing insulation to our nerve cells. Not only this, lipids are also significant in biological system as they form a mechanical barrier. That is, they make cell membranes, phospholipids, which separate a cell from the external environment. So these cell membranes act as mechanical barrier, and they choose what can go inside the cell and what cannot go. What will be the interaction between the cell and the external environment. So in this lecture, I have introduced you to what are lipids, what are the uses of lipids, and we cannot ignore lipids. And for this lecture, I had taken into consideration the books by Wade and Bruce, Finar, Morrison and Boyd, and Solomon. Thank you.